Chosen one, you have already wondered why you feel you are fighting something, even when no one around you see this war. No, you are not here by chance. Something bigger brought you to this video, and you will understand why in the next few minutes. There is a truth hidden behind your pain, behind your strength, behind everything you faced in silence. And today, you will see this truth like never before. If this video has already moved your soul just for this initial question, leave your like right now. It helps spread this message to those who also need to wake up. Subscribe to the channel to continue this journey of consciousness, truth, and power. Here, each video is a weapon against darkness. And in the comments, I want to see you present with number 22. It's our wake up code. If you have gotten here, it is because you are ready for something much bigger. Now take a deep breath, because what is to come will completely change the way you see your own existence. While millions walk asleep through the streets, oblivious to what really consumes them, an invisible war plagues the world. This battle is not made of bullets or bombs, but of silent energy, influence, and manipulation. It happens behind the scenes of mind, spirit, and human emotions. People live as puppets, led by forces they are unaware, being brought to despair, confusion, and emotional ruin without even understanding why. For most, all this seems only bad luck, stress, routine. But this is the first trap. The denial that there is a war happening. The most efficient trick of the dark forces was to camouflage in everyday life. Small manipulations, uncontrollable impulses, toxic relationships, without explanation, all designed to weaken the human being out. And while 97% keep sinking into the sea of mistake, thinking they are in control, there is a minority that sees the true nature of this reality. This minority understood that the battlefield is internal, and that everything around, the crises, the fears, the distractions, are just pitfalls to ward off people from their own power. This truth is uncomfortable because it requires responsibility. Knowing that if it is being manipulated is not easy. It is simpler to believe that everything is out of our reach. But when this veil is broken, when it is understood that spiritual war is real and constant, something changes. The conscience awakens, and the warrior gets up. No more victim of the system, but an agent of change. And that's why anyone who sees this war and faces it automatically becomes a threat. A light that illuminates the darkness the most want to hide. In the midst of chaos, those who not only resist but transform the battlefield into sacred territory. They were not chosen by luck or chance, were forged in pain, cut by experience and activated by the truth. They are those who did not retreat in the face of fear, who faced the shadow inside and outside themselves and decided not only to survive but to dominate. This kind of spiritual warrior does not fit the expectations of the world, and therefore confuses enemies. It is unpredictable, firm, and unshakable. Demons, these forces that feed on disorder, addictions, and hopelessness, never imagined that a generation could arise capable of unmasking them. They always had passivity, distraction, the emotional fragility of the human being. But you broke this cycle. Instead of accepting the imposed standards, you questioned. Instead of repeating the same mistakes, you observed. And instead of surrendering, you reacted. This reaction was the sign. It was the beginning of the 97% drop in the attacks that were launched against you. Being chosen is not a comfortable privilege. It is a mission. It is carrying a consciousness that weighs but liberates. It is walking, knowing that many will not understand their strength, and others will try to destroy it. But even so, you follow. Because in your heart you know that this war is not just for you. It is for all that have not awakened. You are the alert, the example, the living reminder that you can overcome what many do not even recognize as real. While most explode in anger, act on impulse, or drown in anxiety, you have discovered a rare power: self-control. Self-control is not just a quality. It is a silent and devastating weapon against any force that tries to dominate your life. Dark entities do not need brute strength. They infiltrate emotional disorder. They tease, manipulate, await their reaction. And when this reaction comes without conscience, that's where damage begins. But with you, this game has lost strength. Because instead of reacting, you have learned to answer. This domain over their own emotions was not built on easy days. He was born in the fire of pain, disappointment, in the internal struggle. At times when anyone else would have exploded or given up, you chose to pause, breathe, and reflect. This broke the enemy's logic. They expected chaos and found serenity. They expected shouts and found silence. This strategic coldness does not mean emotional coldness but wisdom. The wisdom of understanding that every emotion is a tool, not a tyrant. This ability to stay firm when everything around tries to dismantle you is what made you overcome battles that would destroy anyone. And not just one. You have neutralized the source of the attack. By becoming emotionally impenetrable, you have removed the food of these forces. You have become unattainable because you have learned to govern the most important territory of all, yourself. In a world that fears silence and runs away from introspection, you made the unthinkable. You have embraced loneliness. And there, in the space they avoid, he found the source of his true power. Solitude is not absence, it is intensified presence. This is when the outer noise silences and the inner voice can finally be heard. While the others sought distractions, you sought meaning, and found. Solitude became its temple, where internal battles were overcome without witnesses, but with impacts that echo to this day. Solitude forced you to face your own shadows, fears, and limitations. Without masks, no characters. And that's exactly why she became her spiritual training field. While others feared being alone for not supporting your own truths, you made the truth your ally. And in this process, he disarmed the tricks of those who feed on distraction. Because in silence, you woke up. In silence, you understand. And in silence, you won. This time away from the noise of the world has not weakened you. It shielded you. He sharpened his intuition, strengthened his clarity, and made you invisible to the eyes that only see the obvious. And it was precisely because it didn't depend on external stimuli, validations, or companies to exist that you have become a threat, an autonomous, free, and highly dangerous fortress for any force that depends on your distraction to survive. There is something about you that darkness can't stand it. Your vibration. Its energy field was elevated to such an extent that it is no longer accessible to low-frequency forces. Envy, fear, anger, and guilt. These are the environments where the dark entities thrive. But you don't live there anymore. Your journey has taken you to a state where these frequencies are not sustained, where these presences cannot remain. Not only did you get out of the darkness, you became light in pure state. This level of energy did not arise out of nowhere. It was built with consistent choices, with painful renunciations, with daily internal growth. You gave up habits, people, and thoughts that drained your strength. And instead of this, he cultivated self, love, spirituality, focus, and purpose. This has created a natural shield around it, which repels everything that is not in tune with this new vibration. It's like trying to erase the sun with a candle. It's just not possible. And the most impressive, this high energy not only protects you, it also denounces. Your presence reveals everything that is false, everything that vibrates low. You have become uncomfortable for manipulators, a reflection that exposes the weakness of those who operate in the shadows. Its frequency is so intense that it does not need words to impose respect. She speaks for herself, and as long as you continue to nourish this state, it will remain inaccessible to any force you try to knock you down. Silence is feared by those who live on chaos. It is not absence of sound, it is a presence of control. And when you have learned to use it as a weapon, it dismantled one of the oldest strategies of darkness, provoking to generate reaction. Most people feel obliged to answer, justify themselves, to scream when attacked. But you don't. You understand that true power is not in proving anything to anyone, but not being dragged on the emotional theater that demons stag. His silence was not passivity. It was active resistance, a forceful refusal to participate in the game where the enemy dictates the rules. This choice has changed everything. When the dark forces tried to invade your space with subtle provocations or emotional storms, waiting for uncontrolled, you offered the emptiness, an emptiness loaded with strength, intention, absolute denial to participation, and that disarmed them completely. They expected you to give in to the impulse, to lose control, to return. But you remained a rock before the hurricane, unshakable. And it is in this calculated silence that there is an invisible type of attack because it offers no resistance to use against you. It only denies access. What few understand is that silence, used with wisdom, is a declaration of sovereignty. It transforms the battlefield into a territory where only you decide what enters or leaves. The entities that feed on conflict, simply wither in the face of this absence of energy. They cannot survive when there is nothing to absorb, what to manipulate, what to ignite, and you have learned to keep this flame off. His silence was not cowardice. It was surgical accuracy. It was the art of winning without fighting, of defeating without exposing himself, showing that the true master is not the one who screams but the one who shuts up and yet dominates everything around him. The human mind is the most coveted territory of spiritual war. This is where the most silent and lethal battles are looked at. Most people lose even before they realize that they are in combat, because they do not have internal barriers, discernment, or clarity to identify invasions. But you decided to change that. Instead of allowing others' thoughts, fears, and manipulative voices to dictate your actions, you built a fortress. Brick by brick has raised a mental structure where only what strengthens you has permission to live. This requires more than intelligence, requires courage. This shield did not graduate overnight. She was shaped in the crises, in the internal questions, in the defeats and silent victories that no one has seen. You began to observe your own thoughts as a watchful watchman, separating what was true from what manipulation was. He began to refuse fear as a guide and to confront doubts with conviction. This continuous practice of purifying your mind created a space where attack simply no longer found. The doors were locked, the sealed windows, and the external voices began to echo without strength against the walls you lifted with faith, focus, and presence. Today your mind is not just protected, it is sovereign. You have become the absolute lord of your inner world, and this is an achievement that terrifies the forces that live on the confusion. Because they know, when they can no longer control thinking, there is no possible domain. And the moment you took full control of your mind, the game turned. The manipulations lost effect, the mistakes became visible, and the attacks were intercepted before they were even born. Your mind is no longer a field of war. It is territory conquered. It is the basis of command, and there, no darkness dares to remain. Establishing limits is a revolutionary act when you live in a world that feeds on invasion, and you dare to do that, has built unqualified borders around your energy, peace, and essence. While so many get lost trying to please, trying to be accepted, trying not to look too hard, you understand that protecting yourself is not selfishness, it is survival. It is more than that. It is spiritual wisdom, because where there are clear limits, there is no room for infiltration, and where there is no infiltration, the enemy does not thrive. The obscure forces do not break down doors. They call for sweet words, with emotional blackmail, with appeals to their sense of guilt. And that's exactly where you broke the cycle. You came to say no firmly, not to what exhausts you, not to what sabotages you, not to what you don't honor who you are. And this no became a wall, insurmountable. Demons feed on permissiveness, the absence of resistance, the confusion between compassion and self, abandon. But you made it clear, your compassion exists, but it has the right address, and it will never be used against you again. With this, you broke the nightmare of everyone who saw you as easy access. You have become a living fortress, and the most impactful is that these limits not only protect, they teach. They show the world, and the invisible beings who observe it, that you know its value, that you are no longer available for negotiations that diminish your light. And this kind of clarity is lethal for darkness, because where there is certainty, there is no manipulation. Where there is structure, there are no breaches. Where there are unbreakable limits, there is sovereignty, and you have become sovereign on your own existence. In a world where everyone wears masks, where lies is social currency and the fear of rejection is an invisible chain, being authentic is an affront. And you chose this affront. You chose to be who it is, without filters, without censorship, without shaping the expectation of others. And this gesture, which seems simple, is an earthquake in the dark structure, because they live on illusion. They need you to hate each other, to hide your scars, to believe it needs to be someone different to be accepted. But you didn't fall into this trap. Authenticity is a lighthouse, and a lighthouse illuminates everything, including what you want to hide. By assuming your truths, including the darkest, the most imperfect, the most difficult, you destroyed the power that dark forces had over you, because they can only control what you deny. And when you stopped denying who you are, you also stopped being manipulable. You have become a reflection of what they fear the most. Someone who doesn't embarrass themselves. Someone who, instead of fleeing his own flaws, turns them into strength. This truth you carry is uncomfortable because it contagies. She inspires others to do the same. And authenticity spreads like fire in dry forest. Once it is lit, it is uncontrollable. Therefore, darkness shake before someone who does not lie to themselves, because they know that there is no way to master someone who knows each other, who is accepted, who gets up with all his scars on display. You are that someone, a mirror that reveals, a burning torch, a being that not only speaks of freedom but lives it every day. If there is anything that dark forces dominate with mastery, it is the human ego. They feed him with false compliments, sabotage him with veiled criticism, and imprison him with the desperate need for approval. But you did the unthinkable. You left this cycle. You broke the current of external validation. He learned that the real value does not depend on the look of the other, and that living for approval is to die slowly inside. This understanding set you free from one of the most powerful bonds of the spiritual control system. By failing to seek applause, you have silenced one of the main handling tools. Demons try to seduce with flattery, then punish with rejection. They create an emotional roller coaster that holds the soul in constant oscillation. But you got off this toy. You looked inside and found everything you needed there. Identity, value, strength. And with that, it became unattainable to attempts to manipulate image, status, or recognition. What they say no longer defines who you are, and it goes crazy. This indifference is not cold. It is sovereignty. It is the recognition that you are already complete, and that no applause magnifies you, just as no criticism diminishes you. And someone like that is a danger, because it does not bend for compliments or hides for fear of rejection. This freedom is rare, almost divine. And when you reach it, you not only broke free, you broke the mirror through which the enemy was trying to shape your perception. Now there is only one reflection, that of its own essence. And this one, no one else can manipulate. While many seek protection on objects, symbols, or amulets, you have discovered something infinitely more powerful, an invisible armor made of spiritual alignment, inner truth, and connection with what is eternal. This armor cannot be bought or borrowed. It is built in silence, with conscious choices, faithful to its own essence, with discipline that few support to maintain. And the most extraordinary, it protects you even before the attack comes. She anticipates. She dissipates. It transforms the battlefield into a territory where the enemy can't even step on. This armor does not shout. It does not display, but its effect is overwhelming. Low-vibration entities, used to dominating vulnerable souls, simply cannot approach those who live at this frequency. They try, but something repels them. They feel powerless, disoriented, annulled. This is because its energy began to vibrate in such a high tune that it became impenetrable. You not only protected yourself, you have become untouchable. Your simple walk already reorders environments, silence confusions, unmasks hidden presences. It is a kind of force that does not impose itself with aggressiveness but with presence, a presence that denounces and dissolves any form of darkness. This level of protection is reserved for those who have done the hardest job. Look inside, accept the truth without masks, and align their actions with their deepest purpose. It is an armor forged in authenticity, self-knowledge, direct connection with the divine source. So it does not break, does not fail, does not wear out. And the frightening for the dark forces, it cannot be overcome with any of the conventional attacks, because it is not made of matter, it is made of light. And where there is light, the darkness has no time. They always attacked in the shadows, believing that invisibility was their biggest advantage. But you did something they never expected. It turned ahead, looked into the eyes of fear, and did not retreat. And in doing so not only resisted, you reflected. He reflected back to them all that they have always tried to hide. Their own weakness, their lack of real power, their total dependence on human ignorance to exist. You have become a mirror that does not distort, that does not soften, a mirror that reveals the naked, raw, and devastating truth to those who have always prospered in illusion. This attitude of facing evil without wavering is what broke 97% of the strategies released against you. They were not prepared for it. They were trained to manipulate the weak. not to deal with someone who exudes clarity. The presence of someone awake is like a lit torch in a quarter of lies. The masks fall, the tricks fail. The investees lose strength. You didn't have to fight like them. You just showed who you are. And that, for them, was like facing a light earthquake in a world where they always dominated through darkness. This exposure destroys them inside, because their greatest fears are not weapons, prayers, or invocations, is to be seen, be perceived, be reduced to what they really are, fragile shadows that do not survive the presence of a whole soul. You brought this light to the battlefield and with it dismantled your illusions. Every step your step forces them to retreat, because you not only won them hard, you won them with truth. And this one, no shadow can stand. There is something that few realize. Fear is the currency in the underworld of spiritual influences. It is the fuel, the vital energy that feeds the manipulation and domination schemes. When you feared, they grew up. When he doubted himself, they advanced. When he hesitated, they infiltrated. But the moment you said enough, not with words but with posture, conscientious, active faith, the gear that kept them alive simply stopped. The cycle was broken. The source was cut. And they started to define. This break is not symbolic, it is energetic. The refusal to feed fear is as powerful a gesture as a war of war, because in doing so, you broke the silent agreement that most don't even know they signed, to surrender. You got up when it all said to retreat. You chose to believe when everything around you shouted despair, and this seemingly simple act has changed the entire spiritual structure around it. The forces that before you were around you realized that you disconnected from the frequency that supported them, and without this food, they have no choice but to disappear. This internal change has generated a chain reaction. Situations began to crumble. Toxic people walked away. Problems that seemed endless began to lose strength, because the root of all this was fear, and fear you defeated. This victory was not noisy, but it was absolute, and the most transformative. Now that you know how to cut this cycle, you will never be arrested again, because once you learn not to fear, you also learn to dominate. And this is the end for any force that tries to control you. Most are struggling to survive, reacting, trying to keep your head out of the water. And this mindset, as brave as it may seem, is still limited, because those who survive are always at the mercy. But you transcended this state, you got out of survival and entered the domain. He stopped living under attack and started to establish the rules. He stopped reacting and began to command. And this is not arrogance, it is evolution. It is a new stage of consciousness where you recognize that you are not only here to resist darkness, but to replace them with light. This spiritual rule does not mean that you do not face difficulties. It means that you now face them from above, with perspective, with authority, with presence. You stopped seeing obstacles as monsters and saw them as tests. And more than that, as tools for expansion. Because those who dominate the spiritual environment understand that even attack can be converted into impulse, that each trap can be reversed in lever. You are no longer running away from the war, you redesign. You do not expect calm, you create the order. This new way of living is revolutionary. He challenges all the logic of dark forces, because they know how to manipulate the desperate, but they don't know what to do with the sovereign. And by assuming this domain posture, you have become an exponential threat, because now it is not just you who are free, it is you freeing territories, consciences, energies. You are no longer a target to become a vector, not just survive the storm, you learn to govern the climate. There are temporary victories, those that only move evil for a while, but what you have achieved is permanent. It is not the absence of attacks that defines this new phase, it is their uselessness. They still try, still observe, they still look for loopholes, but you already know. You changed the game. You are no longer who you were. It is no longer fragile, accessible, predictable. His energy has become unreadable to evil algorithms. His spirit began to vibrate at a level where the arrows do not arrive, where the currents do not reach, where fears dissolve before shape. This victory was not won with a war cry, but with silent discipline, with the persistence of being who you are, with faithfulness to the truth, with the daily refusal to lower your vibration to please, to fit, to survive. You broke the invisible handcuffs. He broke pact that he didn't even know he had done. He cleaned memories that still pulled you down. disconnected from the bonds that fed the pain, and all this without audience, without recognition, but with real power. Today, those who once hunted you retreat because they know there is no more space, there is no breach. You are no longer just someone in resistance, you are a freed territory, an expanding point of light, a wall that inspires others to rise. The real victory is not about the enemy, it's about yourself. And by winning you won everything. So they will never touch you again, because now you have become the very end of darkness.